Maryland criminal defense attorney Max Frizzalone here, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the crime of shoplifting. I'm going to first talk about what kind of charges you might receive if you've been charged with shoplifting. Next I'll talk about what some of your potential defenses might be. Then I'll talk about how you can prepare for court. And finally, I'll just give you some general advice on looking for a lawyer for your shoplifting case if you have one. First and foremost, what kind of charges can you receive for shoplifting? Well, in Maryland, shoplifting is generally charged as theft, and theft in Maryland is charged based on the amount of what was supposedly taken. In the context of a shoplifting case, let's say at a self-checkout, the value of the unscanned items is aggregated by the officer, and then you're issued a charge of theft based on that value. So let's talk about some of the values. Everything under $100 is theft under $100. That's a 90-day misdemeanor. Anything between $100 and $1,500 is charged as theft between $100 and $1,500, with a 6-month maximum, also a misdemeanor. Once you approach more than $1,500 worth of things that are taken, you enter felony territory. Theft between $1,500 and $25,000, for example, is a 5-year felony. And there's theft $25,000 to $100,000 and theft $100,000 plus. But in the context of shoplifting, we're usually at or under that $1,500 mark. So, now you know what charges you might have. Next, let's talk about some of the defenses you might have. Shoplifting cases are generally dealt with in the district court, meaning that once you have an attorney and you've received a summons, your first court date may very well be your trial date. The most common defense to all shoplifting cases is the state can't prove their case. So let's say, for example, the state does not have a loss prevention officer in court. That might be grounds enough right there on the trial date to say, your attorney to say to the state, you can't prove this case, dismiss it. And sometimes that happens. Other times an alternative resolution will be offered, something like a stet. Many shoplifting cases these days, there is not an actual loss by the store. So typically I don't see my client having to pay the store extra money if they got all of the stuff back, whether it's clothing or food. But in cases where there's loss, often something can be resolved by the value of the loss. Some of the other defenses I've used include video evidence. Let's say I got the video and it's not my client. This happens a lot when the person leaves the store and an officer shows up and says, that's Billy Bob Thornton. Well, maybe he just looks like Billy Bob Thornton, but it's actually my client who is not Billy Bob Thornton. The next defense is often a mistake, right? It does happen. People forget to scan things. People these days in many counties in Maryland are not receiving bags at stores anymore. So some people are walking around the store and loading up reusable bags. Maybe they forgot to scan one of the reusable bags worth of stuff. That kind of thing happens a lot in a world where self-checkout is very popular. So, I've talked to you a little bit about the charges and the defenses. If you've received a shoplifting case, how should you prepare for court? Well, not to lead into the fourth piece of advice, but you should most certainly seek the advice of an attorney. The next thing that you need to do to prepare for court is to understand the charges and review the evidence. The evidence should be provided to your attorney, whether that's a public defender or your private attorney, by the state of Maryland. And part of preparing for court is knowing what the other side has against you. Finally, I always recommend to most of my clients in theft cases that you take some steps ahead of court. Often this can be something like doing some community service, or perhaps if it's a restitution issue, getting together some of the money that the store says they've lost. All right, you now know what the charges are, what some potential defenses might be, how you should prepare for court. Finally, how do you find an attorney for a shoplifting case? Well, first and foremost, identify what county your charges are in. So if your charge is in Washington County, I recommend you look for a lawyer with a Washington County office. The same applies for any other county. If you're looking for an attorney in Prince George's County, for example, our office has an office in Prince George's County. I'd recommend you look for a full-time criminal firm who has an office in the county where your case is. Worst case scenario, if you're running into trouble with finding attorneys and you're not finding them through the internet or referrals from friends, you can always contact your local bar association. Good luck with your case.